My daughter hugged me at the door, like she hadn't just spent the last hour going through my filing cabinet. I noticed the drawer wasn't fully closed. I noticed the folder labeled property and insurance had been moved to the front. I noticed all of it, but I smiled and said the coffee was ready. And Tamara said she couldn't stay long, and that was that. She was my youngest, 34 years old, with her father's eyes and a smile that used to make me forget everything that hurt. After my husband Harold passed, 3 years ago now, a Tuesday in November, that I will never be able to think about without feeling the cold in my chest, she was the one who called every day. She was the one who drove up from Charlotte on weekends and sat with me on the back porch while I talked myself through the grief. I thought that was who she was. I thought I knew my daughter. I found out later that the calls started getting shorter right around the time she and her husband, Darnell, refinanced their house. I am not a woman who likes to think the worst of people. My mother raised me in a small house in Winston-Salem, with 5 other children and very little money, and she always said that bitterness is a thing you carry alone. Nobody else feels the weight of it but you. So I spent 67 years trying not to be bitter, trying to believe that people meant well, that love was mostly genuine, that family was the one place where you didn't have to watch your back. I built something. I want to say that plainly, because it matters to the story. Harold and I built something together. He was an electrician, and I spent 22 years as a school administrator in the Mecklenburg County District, and we were not flashy people. We didn't take lavish vacations or drive expensive cars. We bought our house in 1989 for a price that would make people laugh today, and we paid it off in full by 2004. We saved. We invested carefully with the help of a financial advisor named Theodore Obi, who Harold trusted completely and who I still meet with twice a year. We had a rental property, a small duplex in Concord that Harold's brother helped us purchase in 2001. When Harold died, I inherited everything: the house, the duplex, the retirement accounts, the life insurance. Not a fortune by any standard, but enough. More than enough for a woman living alone who still made her own lunches and checked the grocery store circulars before she shopped. My children knew the rough shape of it. I had never hidden that we were comfortable. But I had also never put numbers in front of them, because Harold always said that was a conversation for when the time was right. The time, apparently, became very right after he was gone. It started so slowly that I keep second-guessing my own memory, wondering if I'm being unfair. Tamara and her husband Darnell began visiting more often. My son Lawrence, who lives in Atlanta, and had always been the more distant one. Not cold, just busy, caught up in his own life with his wife Cherie and their 2 boys, started calling again. And my older daughter, Faye, who I would describe as the practical one, the one who researches everything and never makes a decision without a spreadsheet, began sending me articles. Articles about falls. Articles about elderly women living alone. Articles about the hidden dangers of large homes, of stairs, of properties that were too much for one person to maintain. I am 67 years old. I walk 2 miles every morning. I have high blood pressure that is managed well with medication, and I had a knee replacement 4 years ago that healed completely. I do not need articles about falls. But I read them. I read every single one because they were my children, and I wanted to understand what they were worried about. Then one evening in March, all 3 of them came to dinner at the same time. That had not happened since Harold's funeral. I made pot roast and cornbread, and I was so glad to have them all in the house together that I didn't ask why. I just fed them and listened to them talk over each other, the way they always had. And I thought, this is what I've been missing. This is the thing grief stole from me. After dinner, Faye cleared the table and poured coffee, and then sat back down and folded her hands on the table like she was chairing a meeting. "Mom," she said, "we've been talking, and we're worried." I looked at her, then at Tamara, then at Lawrence, who was staring at his coffee cup. "About what?" I said. "About you. About this house. About how much you're managing on your own. I want to be fair to them." In that moment, I genuinely believed they were worried. I believed the concern in Faye's voice and the way Tamara reached over and put her hand on top of mine. I believed that this was love, complicated and clumsy the way love sometimes is, but love all the same. I said I was fine. Faye said she knew I thought I was fine, but they'd been looking into some options. Tamara pulled out a folder, and I noticed the folder. I noticed the tabs. I noticed this was not something she had put together the night before. And she started talking about senior living communities. Not nursing homes, she said quickly. Nothing like that. Independent living. Lovely places, she said, with amenities and activities and people my own age. I said, I have people my own age. My church is full of them. Lawrence finally looked up from his coffee. Mom, the house is a lot. We just think it might be time to think about simplifying. Simplifying, I said. You don't have to decide anything tonight, Faye said. We just want you to think about it. I told them I would think about it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared. Not because they had planted some seed of doubt about my own abilities. I didn't sleep because something felt wrong in a way I couldn't name yet. There was a shape to that conversation that I recognized without being able to identify it. The coordination of it. The folder Tamara had already prepared. The way Lawrence had been staring at his cup like he already knew his lines and was just waiting for his cue. I called my friend Odessa Pierce the next morning at 7 a.m. Odessa and I have been friends for 31 years, since our children were in elementary school together. She is a retired nurse and possibly the most clear-eyed person I have ever known. She doesn't soften things. It's one of the reasons I've kept her close. I told her about the dinner. I told her about the folder. I told her about the articles. Odessa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Marlene, when's the last time any of them asked you how you were feeling? I had to think about it. The dinner, I said. Faye asked. That's not what I mean, Odessa said. I mean asked how you were feeling. Not as a setup, not as the first line of an argument. Just asked. I didn't have an answer. Call Theodore, she said, and get yourself a good estate attorney. Do it this week. I almost didn't. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself these were my children and I had raised them and I knew who they were. I told myself Odessa was being dramatic. But I called Theodore Obi on a Thursday. And I told him what had happened, and he was quiet in the way that a man is quiet when he is choosing his words carefully. Have any of them asked about your accounts directly? He said. I thought about the filing cabinet, the folder that had been moved. Not in words, I said. Theodore said he thought it would be a good idea to meet in person. He also said he had a colleague, an estate and elder law attorney named Vivienne Hall, who he'd been working with for years and who he trusted completely. He said it might be worth having a conversation with her. I met with Vivienne Hall on a Friday afternoon in April, in her office downtown. She had reading glasses pushed up on her head and a directness that I appreciated immediately. She explained to me what the legal landscape looked like, what my rights were, what the risks were. She explained what a durable power of attorney meant and what it didn't mean, and what to watch for if anyone ever asked me to sign one. I walked out of that office with a new will, an updated beneficiary designation on every account, and a very clear understanding of where I stood. I told no one. Meanwhile, my children kept going. Faye sent me more articles. Tamara started calling daily again, the way she had right after Harold died, except now the calls had a different texture. She asked about the duplex in Concord. She asked if I'd thought about what a property management company would cost. She asked, and I remember this clearly because I had to close my eyes to keep my face neutral, even though she couldn't see me, if I had ever thought about putting the property into a family LLC. Where did you learn about that? I said. She said she'd been doing some research. I said that sounded interesting and I'd have to look into it. In May, they asked me to see a doctor. Not my doctor. I have a physician I've trusted for 11 years, a woman named Dr. Anita Beaumont, who delivered both my grandchildren's birth announcements with as much joy as if they were her own family, but a geriatric specialist. For a full evaluation, Faye said. Just to have a baseline. I agreed, not because I was worried about myself. I agreed because I had already talked to Vivienne Hall, and Vivienne had said, let them feel like things are going the way they want. Don't tip your hand. Just keep your eyes open and your records in order. So I went to the evaluation. The doctor's name was Dr. Samuel Whitfield, and he had a gentle manner and asked me thoughtful questions. I answered everything correctly. I drew the clock. I counted backward from 100 by sevens. I explained a proverb. Dr. Whitfield told me I was in excellent cognitive health and he saw no cause for concern. Faye looked at the results, the way someone looks at a traffic light that just turned red when they were certain it was going to stay green. That same week, Darnell, Tamara's husband, started coming to the visits. I had always liked Darnell well enough. He was quiet, worked in logistics, coached their son's little league team on weekends. But now he had opinions about my house. He stood in the kitchen and talked about square footage. He talked about the housing market. He said, in that careful way people say things they've rehearsed, that my house would sell fast in this market. I'm not selling my house, I said. He smiled and said, of course, no pressure, just thinking out loud. I watched him look at the crown molding on his way to the bathroom, and I thought, you have been looking at this house as something that isn't mine for quite some time. In June, Faye presented me with a document. She called it a family care agreement. She said it was just to formalize how they were going to help me. It outlined, and I am not exaggerating, that in exchange for their assistance with my daily needs and property management, I would grant them shared oversight of my financial accounts. Shared oversight. I took the document. I said I wanted to read it carefully. Faye looked relieved, the way people look when they think they've gotten past the hard part. Tamara hugged me. Lawrence said he was glad we were all getting on the same page. They left. I sat at my kitchen table and I read every word of that document 3 times. Then I scanned it and emailed it to Vivian Hall. Vivian called me back within the hour. She said she had seen versions of this before. She said the language was designed to sound reasonable while granting my children significant access to my assets under the guise of care coordination. She said I should absolutely not sign it. I already knew that, but it helped to hear someone else say it. Here is something I've thought about a lot since all of this happened. Why didn't I say something sooner? Why didn't I sit them down and say, I know what you're doing, and it stops now? Part of it was what Vivian advised. Keep quiet, keep watching, but part of it was something harder to explain. These were my children. I had held all 3 of them before they could open their eyes. I had sat up at night with Tamara when she had ear infections, and she screamed for 3 hours straight. I had driven Lawrence to every track practice for 4 years. I had helped Faye study for her CPA exam at my kitchen table, both of us eating reheated leftovers at midnight. I needed to be certain. I needed to not be the woman who burned her family down over a suspicion. But I was also done being managed. In July, I told them I had decided to stay in my house. I also told them I had been working with a financial advisor and an attorney to review my estate plan, and that everything was in very good order, and that I had made the changes I felt were appropriate. Faye's expression changed in a way that told me everything I needed to know. She asked, and I will give her credit for trying to sound casual, if I had made any changes to the will. I review my estate documents regularly, I said. Harold and I always believed in keeping things current. Mom, I'm not finished, I said, and I was. I told them that I loved them. I told them I knew they were worried about me. Or at least that something had started as worry before it became something else. I told them I was not going to pretend I didn't notice the filing cabinet, or the folder Tamara brought to dinner in March, or the document Faye asked me to sign that would have given them access to my accounts while I was still alive and healthy. Tamara started to say something. I held up my hand. I want you to understand something, I said. I am not angry. I am not going to stop being your mother. But I will not be managed. I will not be moved out of my home. I will not sign anything that trades my independence for someone else's idea of what's convenient. And if that is the relationship you want with me, the one where I'm just a set of assets to be organized, then I think we have some very serious things to talk about. Nobody spoke for a long time. Lawrence said quietly, Mom, I'm sorry. He meant it. I could tell from the way his voice broke at the end. Lawrence had always been the one who went along with things, because going along was easier than standing apart, and I think some part of him had known, for months, that this had gone wrong. He apologized again before he left, and he hugged me longer than he had in years, and I believe that apology was real. Faye and Tamara left without saying much. Darnell didn't come. I sat on the back porch after they were gone, in the same chair where Tamara and I used to talk through my grief after Harold died, and I thought about my mother. About what she said about bitterness. About carrying weight that nobody else feels but you. I decided I wasn't going to carry it. A few months later, Odessa and I went to Savannah for a long weekend. I had never been, which is embarrassing because it's only 4 hours away, and Harold had always said we'd get there eventually. We stayed in a bed and breakfast in the historic district, walked the squares, ate shrimp and grits at a place that didn't seat you unless you had a reservation weeks in advance, and drank sweet tea on a porch overlooking the river at sunset. I called Lawrence from that porch. His number, not a group text, not the family chat where Faye ran the conversations. Just Lawrence. We talked for almost an hour. He told me Cherie had said from the beginning that the whole thing had gone too far. He told me he was ashamed of how long he'd let it go on without saying anything. I told him I wasn't going to litigate the past, but that I needed him to be honest with me going forward, and he said, yes he would. Faye called in October. She said she wanted to apologize. I listened. I told her I accepted the apology and that I loved her, but that trust was going to take time. She said she understood. I believe she did. Tamara and I are still finding our way back. It's slower with her. Partly because she was the one I had trusted the most after Harold died, and so what she did, or what she was willing to do, cut the deepest. Partly because I don't think she's fully reckoned with how far she was willing to go. She calls now, and the calls are shorter, and they don't have that texture of an agenda underneath them. That's something. I'm holding on to that. Theodore Obie and I meet twice a year, the same as always. Vivian Hall sends a card at Christmas. My duplex in Concord has new tenants, a young couple, both teachers, with a toddler and a dog. I saw them once when I drove out to check on the property, and they waved from the yard like people who are genuinely glad to be where they are. That's all I ever wanted the property to be, a place where someone was glad to be. Odessa says I should write all of this down. She says there are women out there who are in the early stages of what I went through, and they need to hear that it's possible to catch it. That you can love your children completely and still say, this far and no further. That an inheritance is something you give, not something they're owed. That a house is not just an asset. That a mother is not a problem to be managed. I think she's right. I usually do. My name is Marlene, and I have lived in this house for 35 years. The magnolia tree Harold planted in the backyard when we moved in is taller now than the roofline. And in the spring it blooms so heavily that the whole yard smells like something you don't have words for. I sit under it sometimes in the early morning, before the neighborhood wakes up, with my coffee, and I think about all the things this house has held. The grief, and the growing, and the ordinary Tuesday afternoons that you don't realize you're going to miss until they're gone. I am still here. Nobody moved me anywhere, and the tree is still blooming.